Hey everybody, welcome to the GMG review. Today we're taking a look at Lion Rampant, Medieval Wargaming Rules, 2nd edition from Osprey Games. Now this is a expanded and sort of collated version of the 2014 Blue Book Osprey Wargames game, Lion Rampant, and is a set of medieval wargaming rules for anything in the medieval period, really. It is a sort of like expanded version of that Wargame series book, the blue cover books from Osprey, and includes everything from playing in different scales to example forces for different periods and settings, and even some sort of fantastical legendary stuff like Robin Hood and his Merry Men to use in your games. Now, what is Lion Rampant? Well, it was a great introduction in here, actually, by Daniel Mercy, which talks about his sort of like design goals for the game. And I'm just going to kind of paraphrase those. A lot of medieval war games are very concerned with being simulations, and his forward is all about writing a Dark Age sort of era game that is more concerned with being able to play a fun game and push your colorful toy soldiers around the table than it is with being a simulation and having exactly the right sort of like foes fighting each other. The main thrust of that is a lot of historical wargaming is more concerned, well, and I shouldn't, that's a generalization. Traditionally, a lot of historical wargaming is concerned with simulating the results of something from history versus sort of hypothetical situations where you put together units that would have never seen each other in combat or nations that would never gone to war and playing out games. This is more the latter than the former. It's designed that you have a beautiful collection of miniatures, you want to play a game with your friends, and you can put those down onto the table. It's also not super concerned with massive scale. A lot of historical war games would try to recreate the exact numbers of combatants, and there could be hundreds of models on the table. This is more a couple dozen miniatures, and not so concerned about rank and flank and putting things in squares, looser formations, a little more fluid, and is designed to sort of do those heroic encounters that you might see in films and TV set in the sort of like Dark Ages or medieval period, and not so much the mass, huge squares of troops fighting each other in combat. So, other things, what's changed and what kind of stuff could you expect to be in here? Well, it's all D6 based. It uses typically up to 12 six-sided dice. No fancy dice required. That was no design goal. It's in here. You want some nice models. You can play in 15 mil. There's some advice for doing that, or 28, 32 mil, whatever your collection looks like. Something to measure inches, a table with some terrain. So, 4x4 to 6x4 is probably good. And some markers indicate who's battered. So that's units that have taken a significant amount of casualties are kind of suppressed. Battered is a state that you can shake off potentially, but it does mean that you will be less effective on the table when you are battered. And that's it. So really the idea being that you and your opponent have a collection of similarly scaled miniatures. You could play in 15 mil. They just recommend that you either measure in centimeters or play in a smaller table size, and then you could have the same sort of like overall experience just by reducing the measuring increment and increasing even the model count. All right, so here's an example of a 24-point warband. You've got some elite cavalry and the sort of basic army construction as well. Some elite cavalry, some heavy cavalry, 2 heavy infantry units at 8 points, so 4 points each, some crossbows, and some skirmishers. So there's your heavy cavalry at 4 points. That's your heavy cavalry at 4 points. Those are your elite cavalry, so you're like super knights at 6 points. 2 heavy infantry units here with spears. Unit of crossbows, which are, I'm trying to look, these ones, and then some skirmishers over there to take the jack of all trades role of going off and doing things. Lovely full color art in here too. And then some important rules conventions. All dice are ordinary 6-sided dice. For combat results, dice are counted individually, but for order and courage tests, roll 2 dice and add them together. So it's a 2d6 roll versus individual d6 rolls. Expect high scoring dice to favor you and low scoring dice to be against you. Rerolls can never be rerolled. Each model represents 1 warrior, so it's a 1-to-1 ratio. And then all measurements are given in inches. Round down fractions. You measure closest model to closest model when you measure everything. And there's no unit facing. Models can see, move, and shoot in all directions. Lion Rampant. All right, unit profiles. Here's an example of a unit, right? Now you can see they're multi-based here, which is fine too. It doesn't really matter as long as you can mark casualties and stuff. But a heavy infantry unit, for instance, is by 12 models. This will be familiar to a lot of people who play medieval skirmish games, like even Saga. They tend to be in dozens for whatever reason. And you have different values here. Now, down this column here, you typically have your order value if you want to activate. So they require a 6+ on 2d6 roll to activate to attack, a 5+ to activate to move. So it's a bit easier to get them to move than to fight. No shooting, they don't have any ranged weapons. Their courage test is a 4+. They're pretty brave because there's lots of them and they're all together. And armor of 3. Now, an armor of 3 means it takes 3 successful hits typically to kill one guy with shooting or in combat. So for every 3, one guy will die. Their point value, which is 4 to typically 24-point games. There is advice for playing larger and smaller games too. And then you've got your attack value of 5+, your defense value of 4+, your shoot, and your maximum movement. So when they're attacking, you're rolling that many. Typically, if they're full strength, you're rolling 12 dice. If they're at half strength or less, so if they're above half, you're rolling 12 dice. If they're below half, you're rolling 6 dice, and that's the value you need to hit on, would be 5+. And then you're canceling hits with your defense value. Your maximum movement, 6 inches, and then they get special rules, Wall of Spears, which allows them to defend and fight in combat. Unit cohesion, it's all models. Basically, you have one central miniature, and all models need to be within 3 of that. So there's usually a leader model. The recommendation is maybe use a banner as your leader. So if you have your banner in your middle of your unit, everybody's within 3 of that, then you're in coherency. So it's kind of a cloud-style unit leader. Different types of terrain. You get rough terrain, obstacles, obscuring terrain, cover, and impassable terrain. It's all exactly what it sounds like, but you should define it with your opponent before you start playing. And then your leader. Every army needs a leader. They're in charge. They have a 12-inch bubble at which they project courage, and also if they come within 12 inches of the enemy leader, they can issue challenges and fight a duel, and the winner of the duel, of course, will slay their opponent and potentially kill them, and would cause ripple effects through the rest of the army. They are basically a free model. They're part of a unit and can't leave it. They move and fight as any other ordinary model. They'll always be the last model to die in a unit unless they fail a lucky blow or during a challenge. Lucky blow is if they get shot at. If it contains the leader, you always roll snake eyes. If you roll double ones, then the leader has to come off. Each turn you may reroll 1 failed move, attack, or shoot test, no other test within 12 inches of your leader's model unless he or she is battered. This may be applied to the leader's own units. Basically, you get a reroll when you fail to activate. Leaders get +1 to your total for courage test if they're within 12 of the leader. They may shoot challenges, and distances from your leader's unit and skills are measured directly from your leader's model, not from any other model in that unit. Leader rules are only applied if leaders in play on the tabletop. All right, so the turn sequence. So first, attacker's activation phase, defender's activation phase, and that'll go back and forth depending on the scenario. Someone's the attacker and someone's the defender, and that's over the course of the whole game. Additional activation phases, engage with more than 2 players, and then the end of the turn, begin the next turn of the game unless the game is ended, in which case all players total their glory to see who wins. So now typically there isn't like a set turn limit to the game, it's by scenario. So a lot of scenarios, like the big core one is until somebody has 5 or until there's 5 or less units left on the table. If one side's taken casualties even and the other hasn't, you can get down to below 5 or less. But as soon as there's 5 or less, you count up the glory for who's killed the most points worth of units. If it's a draw, then 3 points of glory each. There can be different things that add more glory, like submissions that can do that. If there's special units in your army to spend your last couple points, like a holy man or a bard almost, you could earn additional glory for killing those units. And then the higher score wins. Now, when you activate your units, you keep activating until you fail a test. When you fail a test, you hand activation over to the other side. So the attacker goes first. Attacking player carries out actions until an ordered activation test is failed. Then you would hand over to your opponent. The defender's activation phase. Defending player carries out actions until an ordered activation test is failed. Now, you might have noticed that it's actually fairly easy to pass those tests, but when you do finally fail one, you would go back. Additional activation phases in games with more than 2 players carry out an additional activation phase for each additional player in the game. And then at the end of the turn, begin the next turn of the game unless the game is ended, in which case all players total their glory to see who wins. So the attacker gets to go first, but as soon as they fail a test, they're not activating any more units that turn. And then same with their opponent. So that leader reroll is really important to keep your army moving and stuff. Now, when you activate your units, you start off, you can issue a challenge. If your leader's within 12 of the other leader, you rally all your battered units. If they're battered, then you have to make a courage check, and if you pass, you can remove the battered counter. Otherwise, there's penalties for activation. And with the exception of failed wild charges, the unit cannot test to activate more than once in a turn. A unit that has tried to rally may not make wild charges. Wild charges are basically if they they're like a frenzied troop choice almost. They might make a wild charge. If your leader issues a challenge, his or her unit may not attempt a wild charge or ordered activation during this activation phase, but will attempt a rally if required. And once again, a marker can sort of remind this. And some units can countercharge or evade. It's like a special skill. So the activation sequence. You start your activation phase. Is the enemy leader within 12 of your leader? Yes, you can issue a challenge, and if you do so, you duel. No. Do you have any battered units? Yes, attempt to rally all of them. And then you can rally or retreat if you fail. Do you need to have any units that need to test for a wild charge? Yes, resolve all your wild charges. Attack or retreat, evade or countercharge. Do you have any units that have not yet tried to activate? Yes, order each unit until a test has failed or all units have been ordered, and they can either shoot, move, or attack. Those are all separate. So there's no there's no doing more than one action per turn. They each do different things. So move is move your full distance. Attack is make a small move and attack, and then shoot is you shoot your opponent. Now, when you issue a challenge, if they accept it, then you immediately fight a duel. The two models are put in contact with each other and they fight. If you refuse it, the cowardly player's unit must immediately make a courage test as if they've been killed, and they go back in the unit. Now, when you fight a duel, both sides just roll 3d6, and it's the best dice out of hits, basically. So every dice is a 5 or a 6 is a hit. If it's a miss, it doesn't count, and then you add up. If someone got more hits than their opponent, then they killed the enemy leader, and the challenge is over, and the opponent's unit has to make a courage check because they're dead. Otherwise, if it's a draw, then both units retreat, they lick their wounds, and everybody yells, boo! Rallying battered units. You must try and rally at this point in your activation phase. Battered unit will rally and remove its battered marker. It passes a courage test. If the test is successful, remove the battered token. Remember that you cannot activate it again during the phase, so basically you're taking a breath. No more orders to that unit, you're just rallying. If the test is unsuccessful, the unit retains its battered marker, removes one model as a casualty, they've run away, retreats, and then makes no further actions. Retreats and move away from all enemy units. If your final score is 0 or negative number, unit loses heart completely and flees completely off the table, and failed rally activation does not end your activation phase. If more than one of your units must test for rally, then you must choose the order in which you test. However, all battered units must be tested. So once you get battered, you got to test. And then you test for wild charges. If any of your units with this rule have not made a rally activation or issued a challenge, then they must attempt for a wild charge. Wild charges are tested even if the target unit is in rough terrain or behind cover. All wild charges must be tested before moving any other models. So if successful, the unit immediately carries out its attack action against the enemy unit that's of your choice within range. And if unsuccessful, they remain stationary, but they can get a move order later on in the turn. And a failed wild charge does not end a player's activation test. And then you do your activation orders. So for instance, you look at your units, and they have the 3 different actions they can do. Under Muster and Warband, just going to pull up a unit entry here. So if they want to make an attack, you would activate on 2d6, try and roll a 6+, and they would attack. Now on a 5+, they would move. Their move distance of 6, for instance. And when they take the action, if they move, they can move light cavalry go 12 inches, all their mounted units go 10 inches, warriors, infantry, and light infantry and skirmishers go 8, and then all other foot infantry goes 6. So you're not moving super fast per turn, and the first couple turns are going to be you maneuvering into sort of like range of each other, maybe taking some shots and lining up to fight. When you shoot, you will then, in rough terrain is you move 2 inches to go through every inch of rough terrain. Shooting, a unit that maybe ordered to shoot only if it's armed with missile weapons. You choose a target, you shoot, you roll to hit, target then removes any casualties and tests for lucky blows, and target unit must test courage if required. So bows and crossbows shoot 18, slings, mounted bows and crossbows shoot 12, and javelins shoot 6. As long as one model from your shooting is within maximum range of one model of the target unit, you can shoot. Choose a target. Line of sight's all around with no fire arcs, although you may choose your own target. Enemy able to contact the shooting unit during its activation must be the chosen as a target in preference of a unit unable. So if someone's able to charge you during the next turn, you have to shoot them because your unit gets skittish and shoots the closest thing. Otherwise, you can shoot anyone you want. And if more than one target's available, you can choose the unit in range. Units can't split shooting between multiple targets, though. All shots go against one unit. Once you've passed your order test, you roll 12 dice, once again, if you're above half, or 6 if you're below half. And roll that number of dice and apply the results. -1 to each dice score if they're 12 inches or further from the targets. The closer you are, the more accurate you are. Any result equaling or bettering the shoot value is hit. The target is in cover. The target improves their armor rather than reducing the shooting ability to hit. So once shooting unit has rolled its dice, compare the final number against the armor of the target. So units with armor 1 remove 1 model for every hit inflicted. Armor 2, it's 1 for every 2 inflicted. Armor 3, 1 for every 3 inflicted. Armor 4, 1 model for every 4 hits inflicted, and any leftover hits are ignored, and your cover increases your armor by 1. So an armor 1 unit in cover would be armor 2. And like I said, check for lucky blows. You roll 2 dice. If you roll snake eyes, the leader would just be shot and killed in there. And then once you've determined hits and remove any casualties from the target unit, any unit that will need to make a courage test if it suffers casualties, and when the courage test is resolved, your shooting unit activation ends, and you move on to activate another unit from your warband. So you'd be battered basically if you failed that test. A unit counts as in cover with the majority of its models, of course, in cover. And then attacking, a unit that can attack, you choose a target. The target unit makes an attack action if allowed, like evading or countercharging. Move attacking unit into contact, and then you fight. The attacking unit uses attack value, and the unit being attacked uses defense value. Both sides remove casualties and test for lucky blows, and units test courage if required. And if both units are still in contact, one unit will retreat. So first you move, your maximum move distance, move as many models as possible into contact with the target unit, regardless of which models are in contact with the enemy. All models on both sides will fight. Enemies can countercharge or invade if they have the skill. And then, again, 12 dice if you're above half, or 6 if you're below half. Roll that number of dice and apply the following. Units in rough terrain fight with an attack and defense value of 5+ and armor 2 unless they have the flexible special rule, and battered units only ever hit on a 6. Any result equaling or beating your opponent's attack value if attacking, or defense value if defending is a hit. And then remove casualties. Armor 1 removes 1 for every hit, same as with shooting. And then cover increases armor by 1. There's lucky blows, same as with shooting. Roll snake eyes, someone can die. And then a unit that removed the most casualties during its attack must retreat. Once both units have rolled their dice, compare the final number of hits against the armor for both units. For each number of hits equaling the target's armor, remove 1 casualty. And then it's a courage check, or you become battered. So courage checks, let's talk about that then. A 1 test for courage. Unit has taken casualties from attacking or shooting. Unit's attempting to rally from removing a battered marker. The unit becomes your only unit left at the table because they're surrounded and all alone. Your leader refuses a challenge. The total value of your units in play drop below half your warband's full point value. So then everybody has to make a test once you're below half your points remaining. When one of these effects is triggered, you make a courage check. And don't continue to test each and every turn after your leader's been killed, only the point where they die. So for instance, the courage of, let's say, skirmishers is a 5+. So you roll 2d6 and add them together, subtract 1 from the total for every casualty you've taken. So 5+ might sound easy, but a 12-man skirmisher unit that's taken 7 casualties is going to be -7 to that roll. So you need to roll boxcars to pass. Subtract 1 from this total if the point values of your units in play is less than half the full points for your warband, so once your army goes below half. Add 1 to your total of your leader's models within 12, unless they're battered, and then compare to the courage. If the result is equal or greater than the unit's courage score, there's no effect. If the result is lower, you failed the test. And if you fail, your unit becomes battered after retreating. And then retreating is move the unit's normal movement distance, and if at least... if it's possible for at least one model in their unit to retreat off the edge of the table, the unit is, as a whole unit moves in that direction and is removed from play. If not, it must move directly away from the closest enemy unit and must not go within 3 of any other units at any time during the retreat. So basically, they have to stay away from other units. And a battered unit which receives another battered result loses a model of the owner's choice in addition to retreating. So you run away. And when it becomes battered, place a marker next to them, basically showing they're scared. You must make a courage test to remove it and rally. May not be activated other than to rally. Only hit enemies on a 6 if attacked while battering. And may only move as the result of a failed courage test. The only way a battered unit may remove its marker is by rallying. Any other successful courage test doesn't do anything. And then in the game. And in the game is, like I said, based usually on the scenario. Like, for instance, the core scenario is when there's 5 or less units left on the table, the game ends, and then you count victory points. And mustering the warband. So again, I said this is designed to be as flexible as possible, right? So you're making a warband of medieval miniatures, and your collection is going to be different from everyone else's. So the design thrust here was having enough unit types that are representative of generally what was fighting in medieval times that you can make an army. So things like elite cavalry is your knights of the round table. Heavy cavalry, knights in armor, maybe not full plate. Light cavalry, so skirmishers, leather armor, jerkins. Elite infantry on foot, so like foot knights, heavy infantry, light infantry, warrior infantry, levied infantry, archers, crossbows, and skirmishers. And you're looking to make 24 out of this, right? So elite infantry, for instance, are 6 points. That's 1 unit of 12 guys. I think, actually. Elite infantry might even be 8 guys. So it's not even that many models. Let's have a look at elite infantry. That's light infantry, heavy infantry, elite infantry. Yeah, just 6 guys. So it's not actually that many miniatures when you go to actually build your army. 4 units of elite infantry would be your 24-point army, and that's only 24 guys. Whereas heavy infantry would be things like 12 models, and the army adds up pretty fast. The neat thing is at the end here, pick and mix your warbands, fielding a historically plausible army. At the back of this, they're going to give you some examples of what, historically speaking, might have been used by certain nations. So if you're not super, familiar with the times, like the late Roman Empire, so blimey, I mean, have a heavy cavalry with leader for 4 points, 4 units of light cavalry with javelins, and 2 units of archers. That give you a 24-point army. Goths and Vandals, patrician Romans, early Anglo-Saxons in the Dark Ages, later Anglo-Saxons, later Irish Picts, Scottish, Bretons, Byzantine Empire, the Norse, Skraelings, like 1 warrior infantry with a leader, and then 4 units of light infantry and 4 units of skirmishers. So again, a fairly sizable army of like skirmishers, but historically plausible. And then to spend your last few points, you get things like leader skills, so how to differentiate your leader, and that's cool because sometimes you just got like one or 2 points left to spend, and taking a unit of skirmishers might not be so fun, so instead you'll take something like, you're rash, the leader's unit gains the wild charge rule, can't be purchased if the leader's unit already has wild charge. Or courageous, you can reroll each of its courage just once if you're in that unit. Commanding, each turn you can reroll 1 additional failed move, attack, or shoot activation test within 12 of the leader, so you get 2 rerolls per turn. Or if you want to reduce your point value, you can be a weakling. The leader's unit rolls 1 less dice when attacking or shooting, rolling 11 or 5 dice. Vulnerable, killed on lucky blow, results of 2 or 3. So you can actually reduce your point values too if you want to make a more characterful leader. Which is kind of neat. And then spending your last couple points, the Holy Men and Banner special characters, you could have basically +1 courage to your unit by spending an additional point, and if you kill them though, the additional glory. So banners can be used as like marking at the center of your unit, or you could actually have them do something and give you some additional value by taking them for a point. But they give up extra glory then if your banners get seized. Lovely art in this book. And then yeah, all your units, so all the descriptions of all your units, they are different enough in their orders and how they fight. So for instance, like your levied infantry, look at that, courage is 5+, attack is a 7+, get them to do it. They don't want to be here at all. Move is a 6+. But your warrior infantry, they're excited. They could have either flexible, wild charge, counter charge versus infantry, and fast. So they have tons of different special rules. So flexible, this unit uses its normal attack and defense profile when fighting in rough terrain. So this would be like your Germanic skirmishers and stuff like that. Wild charge, when enemy units within attack range of the activate wild charge phase, you must test to go against it because they might just run off. Counter charge versus foot and missiles. When enemies successfully roll to attack this unit before it moves, this unit can make a counter charge. This attack is a 7+. If it succeeds, the 2 units meet a proportionate movement distance between the 2 starting positions and both count as attacking. If it fails, it stands in place of the enemy's charge. This unit does not apply versus mounted units. Countercharge may not be used if the unit's battered. And then fast, this unit does not have its movement through difficult terrain. You can buy them extra upgrades too, like bloodthirsty, make them berserkers or armored, give them some extra armor, which is cool because the warrior infantry can be like tailored to how you like them. Same with light infantry, they can get unit upgrades of like veterans or javelins. And they have the wall of spears rule. There needs to be at least 6 models unit for wall of spears. On a move order, form the unit into a 2-rank formation, so basically rank them up, and it increases their armor by 1 point against attacks but not shooting, so 4 for heavy infantry. If an attack ends with both units still in contact with the wall of spears and either battered or reduced, to fewer than 6 models, the enemy must always retreat, so you bounce off a wall of spears. So even if you won the fight, you're the one retreating basically when it's all said and done, as long as that unit's not battered, if they pass their courage check. So lots of cool ways to tailor your infantry, spend your last couple points, and make your collection sort of like feel right for the period in the army that you're playing with. Option rules, alternating rules for unit proximity and failed activation tests, like going back and forth, playing with larger or smaller warbands, making boasts. So boasts are basically placing a bet on the game. Like, I'm going to kill your leader, or I shall cleave them in half. Routes and kills are worth 12 points in 1 turn. I'll destroy more units than I lose. Your warband must... these are worth 2 glory and these are worth 1 glory. So all of these are worth different amounts of glory. but you can make different boasts to get different amounts of like points. I'll drive them back into the sea. You must make at least one enemy unit retreat during the course of the game. Reducing the model count in units, flanks and rears for units, having shield walls, group activations, and then different unit varieties like camels or chariots or pikemen, handgunners. You want to have some black powder in your team there, slingers. And then weather, terrain rules, retreating, and then the different terrain generators for different areas. There's 15 scenarios in here. They all go off the same deployment zones. So basically this just defines, if you're playing on a 6x4 table, what are all the possible deployment zones? And you deploy back and forth, first all your 1 to 2 point units. It's basically how smart are your units going from the beginning to the end. So your 1 to 2 point units, then your 3 to 4 point units, then your 5 or higher point units, deploy back and forth. And you get to see where your least valuable units are first, and then most valuables get deployed last. Bloodbath's the core scenario, like I said, going to 5 or less units, but you've got things like the fugitive, people on the run, sausages with mustard, the relic, a fairy, a messenger, the taxman cometh, meeting the neighbors, and then hammer and anvil. Lots of different, and blood feuds. There's 16 scenarios. There's a simple 5-game campaign structure in here too for playing 5 games. How many points each game is as you play through, and then you roll for scenarios randomly. And then the 5 games table, so where the game's played, what the scenario is, and who's the attacker and defender. And then the victory table, the number of victories for the red player, 0, the blue player is overwhelmingly victorious, 5, the red player is overwhelmingly victorious. So it's a neat little like dice roll campaign, procedurally generating who's the attacker and defender over the course of it. And there's your sample warbands, like I said, for all the different periods, if you need some inspiration, if you're not like a history buff. A great reading list for playing in the Middle Ages. And then some fantasy stuff too, like the Merry Men or the Round Table, the Thane of Cawdor, and then old school fantasy like Battle of 5 Armies kind of thing here. Orcs and Goblins. And then a nice little syllabus of the changes in the game, and a quick reference for playing. And that's it. How do you build your warband? A little warband sheet at the end too. So there you go. Lion Rampant, 2nd edition, in a beautiful hardback. You saw all the beautiful, gorgeous art. And if you're looking to dip your toes into medieval like wargaming, this is a great first start, because it doesn't really matter. Like, pick a theme for your army, collect some miniatures. As long as you're doing 6s and 12s, the few 8s thrown in there for your different unit types, you're pretty much good to go army collecting wise, and you can fit your collection of miniatures with these rules basically, because they're flexible enough to kind of encompass everything from that period and all the units that you might want to use. So I'm excited about this. Jan and I have been looking for a game to play for a while. I've got tons of like Norse minis from various sources I could paint up. I've got the collection of like Perry minis I got for Sludge I could paint up as well. And doing a like Dark Ages combat thing would be a ton of fun. Be an excuse to paint some models. I'm sure Chase would be into it too. And these rules are, again, flexible enough that we could just throw down with whatever we decided to collect and sort of damn the torpedoes. Doesn't matter if the armies make a super huge amount of sense playing against each other. We could cover it with this rule set. Maybe we'll play that little 5-game campaign too. So anyway, big thanks for watching, and for Osprey for sending along the complimentary copy to review. Until next time, MASH. Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that video. There are tons of other games already recorded for you to watch. Click over to my channel page if you haven't already, and have a look to the dozens of playlists full of videos. I guarantee you'll discover a game you haven't seen played before. I put out new videos 7 days a week, and every day is themed to a different genre as I continue to explore the wider world of gaming. Of course, none of that's possible without you, the viewer, so click a like and subscribe if you'd like to stay on top of what's happening here daily. My 2 kids and I are massively grateful to be able to have the flexibility of this job so I can always maximize my time with them. If you want to support me continuing to put out this content, it's only possible because of my amazing backers on Patreon who support the studio, equipment, and model cost, as well as being how I make the bulk of my living. You can also help out by buying a t-shirt through Spreadshirt, a measuring gauge or widget from Deathray Designs, or buying one of my games and supplements like Last Days, Gamma Wolves, and Blaster. As a way of showing my appreciation, patrons get early access to new games and supplements that I write throughout the course of the year. Huge thanks for watching, it really does help out, and happy gaming.